We're here from Bringing Up Book Lovers. I'm Phyllis Wheeler.
And I'm Sarah Boble, homeschooling mom. And today we are going to talk about Words on Fire by Jennifer Nielsen. So the main character of this book is a girl named Audra, and she and her family live in Lithuania, which is occupied by Russia at the time. And kind of like a lot of countries that are trying to take over another country, Russia is basically trying to wipe out everything that makes Lithuania unique, including its language. And Audra's parents, although she doesn't know this, they are book smugglers. So they're essentially trying to keep the Lithuanian language alive and therefore keep Lithuanian culture and the country itself alive. Like they're like a resistance movement. So so in the book, Audra kind of ends up by herself, and she learns of what her parents were doing and becomes a book smuggler herself. And so she has lots of adventures, and it's not like fantasy fairy tale adventures. It's is like real life kind of. I wouldn't think it's scary for a reader, but if you picture the people who are actually doing this is a historical fiction novel, then they came across real dangers and real threats. So from that perspective, it's a really interesting read. It's a very fast-paced book, I thought.
Right. The stakes are high. There were people who died, and
Mm-hmm.
there are people who were sent to Siberia. It was like it wasn't a little slap in the hand um, if you messed up or if you got
Yeah.
caught.
Yes.
I did want to point out that this is not the Cold War, which you might think. It is during Tsarist Russia. The time frame is 1893
Mm-hmm.
or so. So Russia's been on the warpath for a long time. So tell me, do you think it passes the good story test, Sarah?
Absolutely. It's very exciting, and um, the main character and her friend that she meets, and the kind of the resistance movement, there's just a lot of interesting people involved in it that you get to know about, including the main Russian soldier who's trying to find the roots of the book smugglers. There's an interesting twist with him close to the end of the book. So there's just a lot of exciting. Um, she's constantly learning about book smuggling in general and different ways to do it. So um, I feel like it's just a new world for kids, and it's not a fantasy world. It's like a world that really existed and adventures that really happened probably at some point, in history over 100 years ago. So yeah, I thought it was exciting to read, captivating, learned a lot as well. Mm-hmm.
So what are the themes that you found?
Well, it was interesting because I had just finished reading When My Name Was Kyoko, which was by Linda Sue Park, about when Japan was occupying South Korea. And a similar thing was happening where the occupying country was trying to wipe out the language as a way to, wipe out the culture in the country itself. So there were similar themes in my mind of, perseverance for one thing, not just of the individuals, but this is a movement that spanned generations. Like the Lithuanians had to do this. Some people gave up their lives, like you said, for this work. So it wasn't something that just, they did for a few years and all of a sudden everything was fixed. It was something that took a long time. Bravery for sure. Audra, she had definitely hesitation about joining the book smuggling and didn't know that that's what her parents had been doing. So she was really caught off guard when she, found out what it all was and what it was for. She didn't even really know how to read when she first kind of came across this group of people.
At age
Yeah,
12, right? She was a 12-year-old.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. And also I think friendship was a big part as well. Her friend Lucas that she gets to know through book smuggling, and a couple of the other characters, just their loyalty to one another was something that I really thought came across a lot in the book. that I enjoyed reading as well.
Do you think the book captured what it feels like to be the main character?
Yeah, I thought the author did a really good job with that. Not just the fear, but even kind of the physical things that she was going through, I thought came across were well described. Because there's definitely like cold and hunger and sleeplessness and discomfort and
Right. And she had to cross a river like holding onto a barrel
right. Yeah. Like a cold river.
in the winter, or
Yeah.
at least near the winter. Oh,
So
yeah.
I mean, I thought the author did a really good job of describing those scenes and making me feel like I could almost feel it myself. Mhm.
Early on in the book, when she's just discovering about the book smuggling, she's offered a choice. Like, if you'll turn these book smugglers in, we'll let you have your parents back.
Mhm.
And boy, does she struggle with that one, because she hasn't really made friends with the book smugglers yet. To her, they're just some weird people, and she wants her parents back.
Mhm.
So that's an interesting moral dilemma that I think it really gives depth to the book.
Yeah. And she really struggled with it too, which was good because that's what most people would do. It's not like most people in real life don't just make the right decision or the moral decision or the decision that's going to make the story move forward right away. There were outside factors that finally ultimately tipped her one way, and I was glad that she wrote it that way.
Yeah,
It seemed more realistic.
yeah, I thought so too. Yeah, you don't want a main character who always makes the right choice immediately. That's just not real.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
So,
to us, it's the right choice because we know how it ends historically. But at the time, she doesn't know what the right choice is. I mean, she knows that she doesn't like the Russians there, but since she didn't know anything about book smuggling or kind of how Russia was trying to wipe Lithuania out, she really didn't know what the historical right choice is. She wanted to do what was right for her, which was to be with her parents because she's a young girl. So,
right.
yeah.
Yeah. So memorable scenes.
Well, the one you described, I thought was very memorable. The crossing the river, the cold river, was
Holding,
one that,
holding onto a barrel of books.
yeah, yeah. I thought in general, a lot of the book smuggling scenes were probably the ones that I remember most vividly because they were described so well. There was one where she was made up as a corpse, and she was supposed to be like she and her friend who were smuggling a wagon load of books were pretending to be delivering a corpse for a funeral, and she was the corpse. And that I thought was a memorable scene, not just because of the way she was described, but the fallout that happened along the way as well. Yeah, how about you?
Well, one element we haven't really mentioned is that her father was a magician.
Mm-hmm.
This is a sleight of hand, not real magic, but
An
kind of
illusionist.
magic of illusionist, right? And he had taught her all this stuff. And so she used those principles in her book smuggling. And the main principle is distract. Like if you're pretending to, make a coin vanish and then you pull it out behind somebody's ear, what you're basically doing is keeping the person's attention on one hand while you're doing something with your other hand.
Mm-hmm.
So she would just really be really bold in these book smuggling expeditions by throwing firecrackers and I don't know what all did. Just not sneaking around in the margins, but making a bold disturbance and then quickly scuttling through the area while they're looking at the disturbance.
Mm-hmm.
that that was that was very memorable. I've never read
Yeah.
a book like that.
Yeah, she definitely was very bold and brave. And she grew into that right throughout the book because she wasn't
Yeah,
like beginning. In the beginning, when she was learning, she was supposed to like take a piece of bread or something someone had baked and like see if she could hide it in her skirt from one house to the next. And that was kind of the limits of her, ability to be sneaky. So she definitely
Yeah,
grew into, yeah,
and she was so timid at the beginning too.
right.
Her parents had kind of brought her up to be timid, I guess, because they lived on a farm outside of a village, and they never went into the village. They were afraid of the czar's soldiers and whatever. So she was just used to being isolated,
Hmm.
and that produces a timid person, really, I guess.
Yeah.
So she was fighting that upbringing. That was pretty cool.
Hmm.
So overall likes and dislikes.
I don't think I disliked anything in the book. I thought it was exciting. I thought it was a great read. I thought I loved the story. I didn't know this is the only book that I know that's about Lithuania. I had to like look at a map to remember what part of Europe it was in. So I mean, I learned a lot in general. If that happens, I really like the book, but it was also super well written and the descriptions were really good. The characters were really vivid. The bad guys too. The main bad guy was also very, very well depicted, I thought.
Right. He was a conflicted sort. We eventually found out. It was very
Yeah,
interesting. Yeah.
yeah, it was a good twist. But and I like, you kind of expect there to be plot twists in a book that's, as long as this one is. But there's a lot of like making mistakes and learning along the way, making mistakes and paying for them and then still getting a second chance somehow, which I like that in a story. So yeah.
Yeah. Nothing potentially controversial for homeschoolers, really, right?
I didn't think so. I mean, unless there's if kids are like afraid, like, I don't really know how to describe it, but there's,
It does have a higher level of suspense than some stories.
yeah, that's a
Yeah.
good way to say it. Yeah.
Yeah. So if your kid's really nervous,
Yeah.
you might want to pass.
Yeah.
Yeah. So what questions would you ask your kid to engage the kid about this?
I probably would ask, how has the main character changed throughout the story? Um, that's one thing that I think was a focus of the book. Like it was definitely about the historical events, but the book was about Audra, the girl. Um,
I think it might be interesting to talk about other stories and books that involve the Russia in the time of the czars. For example, Fiddler on the Roof.
hmm,
I can't think of another one right offhand, but uh, you know, what else was going on in the world in 1893? What was going on in America in 1893?
mhm.
That was the Wild West to some extent, I guess, or well, maybe a little bit after that, but
Yeah,
in the same general time region.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. That would be an interesting discussion. Yeah. I mean, I think I always just took it for granted that Lithuania was there. I just had no idea that it was so close to not being there, and the people who kept it going were these, smugglers who worked for
Right.
decades to make sure their language stayed alive.
And I think Lithuania has perennially had this problem, still has it, because Russia is their neighbor, and Russia is very aggressive.
Right.
It's still a problem. Yeah.
Mm.
So how is it redemptive?
Well, for Audra, I mean, for throughout history, because we know what happens, the country was eventually able to gain its independence.
So it has a satisfying ending.
It does. I was glad the epilogue was there.
Maybe it's about time for us to go looking for the author, Jennifer Nielsen.
Yes, we'll be back with her in a second.
Hello.
Hello.
Hey.
And this, folks, is Jennifer Nielsen, our author. So we are talking about Words on Fire, your book.
Okay. I guess the first question is like, where did you get the idea to write about this period of history? How did you come upon that?
Yeah, there's this awesome website called Atlas Obscura that their focus is on just strange or interesting or relatively unknown places throughout the world. And I love this website, and so much that every day they send a digest and of just different places. So at this particular day, I was getting ready to send my editor a new batch of ideas for the next historical novel. And I always send her like 4 or 5 so that we can really discuss and choose from among them. And I was literally ready to hit send on the ideas, and in comes this email from Atlas Obscura. And right at the top of it, it said the Lithuanian book smugglers. And I was like, wait, what? Because I love history, but I don't know any Lithuanian history. And I love books, but I didn't know there was a time that we had to smuggle them and every single thing. So I immediately clicked it on the article and started reading, and every bit of it just clicked off these ideas in my mind. And so I quickly ditched that email to my editor. And I said, there is only one historical novel I want to write next. It has to be about the Lithuanian book smugglers.
Wow. So can you tell us what your research looked like after that? Because I was telling Phyllis, I just have always taken for granted that Lithuania was there, because there's just not much for me to know about it until I read your book. So I couldn't even imagine where you would have gotten the research for it. So what did that look like?
Yeah, it was actually really difficult. And part of it because of the nature of the work. Those who were involved in book smuggling, they're hardly going to write down what they had done. And even after that, they kind of had their first round of freedom from the Russian Empire. They always knew there was a chance it would happen again, which of course it did. So even throughout their lives, they never would write it down. Fortunately, I discovered this book, and it's just this relatively thin book called 40 Years of Darkness that did an amazing job really cataloging what had happened. And it's only available in libraries, and I live in this really small town. And so with my really small town library, I am requesting a copy of this book, and I'm like, can you just find it somewhere in the world? And they did, because librarians are awesome. And that book saved my research. I mean, I did a lot of others, but that book was central.
Oh,
So
cool.
where did it come from? Its home library?
It was a university library and I don't remember which university. I just remember they put it in my hands and I wanted to hug them. I think I did hug them.
Yeah. So this is the first book of yours that I've read. And I noticed that you do, like you said, you love historical fiction. So you've written other historical fiction, but you also write fantasy as well.
Mm-hmm.
So how do you go about finding ideas for your fantasy books, I guess?
I mean, it's the same for any of the books, I suppose. History, of course, is just things I discover along the way, but fantasy, or story ideas in general, it's I guess when something catches my attention, for any reason that it catches my attention, I just immediately start asking questions about it. A lot of times for fantasy, it's song lyrics that I listen to the lyrics and I start imagining the story that might have fueled that, but not always. I mean, it can be a conversation, it can be just an image, it can be really whatever strikes me. It's not so much what comes at me, it's about learning to ask questions. And when you learn to ask questions, you find that story is everywhere.
I want to know about the magic. Do you know somebody who's a magician? I mean, this is a sleight of hand magician. magician.
magic in the books. No, the way it came from, or where it came from, I gotta show you. My son had been going through a phase where he loved flipping cards, and just, can you flip the card and just make it do all sorts of cool things? And he had just been in this phase. And so he and I was just watching him do a lot with cards. And so he and I just got into exchanging card tricks and just doing all sorts of, kind of fun with that, enough that for my birthday, he gave me cards. Like, he gave me this one. It's like these solid gold cards. I mean, not actual gold. And these, which are awesome because they're, both sides are just black. So you have to look very carefully to see what it is. And so it really just came from this thing I enjoyed doing with my son.
Oh, I thought it was really special. I hadn't run into that in a book before. So, and it would really fit into the plot so well, the need to distract.
The need to distract, but also, as she looks at her dad and sees her dad as having magic in its own way. And then this transference through the book where she realizes that it was never about tricks and gimmicks, that the magic was always the books. And that just lights up my author heart, that idea.
Oh, I just wondering, as a kid reads a historical novel and learns about this point in history that, they've never read anything about before, because they're not going to have access to that book, your book that you use for research. I was just wondering, like, how historical some of these scenes were. So.
Yeah. No, certainly there would be any number of ways that you could transfer a book. I included some, those are accurate ways. But generally speaking, whenever I write history, I'm always keeping accuracy as a number one goal, because I understand and I recognize when a young person reads the book, they're going to pull the story out of it, but they're going to pull the facts out of it and remember it as if that happens. And so my research is always as thorough as I can possibly get it, because I know how much that matters.
Did you go to Lithuania?
COVID rather shut those plans down. So as things are starting to open up, definitely I want to get back there. It's such beautiful, beautiful country. And so, yeah, I need to get there.
Yeah. I don't know if I mentioned, but we do this mostly for homeschooling families. So historical fiction books are kind of like a win-win for not just fun to read, but also they're on a lot of, people's book lists will use like a spine for just kind of the details, the facts about that period, but then want to flesh it out with a book like yours to talk about this era and about, Russia and what it was like and colonization at that time and stuff like that. So even just the idea of stamping out a language as a way to get rid of a country in its entirety it's an interesting concept, and it's one I guess a lot of countries have tried to do in the past as well. So we really appreciated that.
Yeah, I was fascinated recently. The discovery of Minecraft, about the uncensored library in Minecraft. Do you both know about this?
No.
Oh, this is like my coolest thing ever that I've discovered. It is an entire, it was built by Minecraft designers, but it's available to anyone when you get into the game. You don't even have to download the game itself to have access to the library. But here's the great thing. That library is stocked with actual censored books, censored articles that cannot be read in many countries legally around the world. And so here it is, banned books, banned journalism in a children's game. And it is getting into the hands of people who are controlled by governments who think they have a lock down on information. It's simply a more modern way of book smuggling.
Wow.
And they're doing it through a children's game.
Wow.
I know, it's literally the coolest thing ever. Definitely worth checking out.
Yeah.
just thinking of the Uyghur Muslims in China who are getting their culture erased even as we speak, right?
The erasure of knowledge and information is a constant threat. That's why books matter. That's why libraries matter, is because we preserve information, we preserve stories, we preserve words and language everywhere we can, or we lose it. And that is a vigilance for all of us to do, is that we preserve what we have and what we know for the future.
Sounds great. So tell me where you live.
I am in northern Utah,
Oh,
and I live kind of in the mountains of northern Utah, just a small town. We have more cows and chickens than we do people, and that's fine by most people here. So it's just a great place to live.
wow. You've always lived there?
No, I used to live, I've always lived in Utah. I used to live on the other side of the mountain, the Wasatch Front. We've kind of circled now to the back side of the mountains, and I wish I had discovered this place earlier. I live in the kind of place where, we have, in our county, we have a grocery store. We just got our second middle school. That's a very big deal in the county. And it's just a place where people measure you on who you are. They don't care about anything other than, are you a good person? And that's how we get measured.
Sounds like a great place.
Come and visit. All of you, everybody come.
Everybody check it out.
Yeah, we'll have a readathon. It'll be on the backyard. It'll be awesome.
Yeah. Well, anything else, Sarah?
I don't think so. If you can't get to Utah to visit Jennifer, then definitely go to the library and get this book. You will love the story. It moves fast. It's a great book. We loved it. Thank you for joining us and for answering our questions. Make sure you go get the book and read it yourself and give it to your kids to read as well. You'll love it and they'll love it. So
thank you all very much. Thank you for having me. And thanks to all of you at home who are learning and teaching and reading and writing. Keep it up.